Hi folks, with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, and this will be a little bit shorter than my usual, but in this essay, I'd like to talk about the cost to business. Business generally, the business that is buying products and services, the business that's selling or manufacturing products and services, we all have to absorb a much higher cost than necessary because of affirmative action and diversity, equity, inclusion, all of which has been designed to assist mass migrants coming to the West. Now, I'll go back just a little bit in time. When the mass migration first began to kick off, there were very few affirmative action and diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. There wasn't much in the way of quota hiring at all. So the people who were arriving as migrants, they had to compete against the locals. And while we were promised by the government, oh no, they're all going to speak good English. Oh no, they all got PhDs. They're all doctors and engineers and rocket scientists. They weren't, of course. They were mostly peasants. And even the ones that you'd say had some sort of qualifications or that they'd got them in a third world, very corrupt, very different type of economy. And so, and their English was very poor. So they had really stood no chance, and they just weren't they couldn't get jobs. They couldn't speak English. They had no local or relevant qualifications or experience. So always the local, white people would be hired. Then the all across the Western world, there was this vigorous, aggressive change where all companies, particularly the bigger ones, but others too, were told, no, you have to have quotas. You have to have a certain number of black and brown people, certain number of immigrants, and a certain number of lesbians. The whole thing was changed. So quota, affirmative action, diversity, equity, inclusion, and so on. And not only were the bigger companies required to do this, but they were any company that wanted to do business with the government had to show that they had lots of black lesbians, and they were hiring lots of black lesbians. So it completely changed the structure of why people were hired and what they were doing. So you had the absurd situation where companies were hiring, X number of black lesbians, I'll use this proverbially, an X number of black lesbians only so they could do business with government contracts. And there were inspectors that would come around and make sure, okay, you say you've got 100 black lesbians, where are they? This type of thing. So it was quite, the resources put into policing it were quite rigorous. So this changed the recruitment, the hiring, the personnel or human resource, or what you want to call it, landscape, quite substantially. Companies were now hiring folks, not because they needed them or they were doing productive work or people who even knew what they were doing, just because they had to fill quotas. Now, the bigger organizations, the big financial companies and they could go to the government, say, okay, we'll do all this. We'll hire these thousands of black lesbians, but you got to give us juicy, cozy contracts with very high profit, non-competitive bids. And, you've got to give us a lot of taxpayer money. So we'll hire all these people that we don't need and don't want and that are useless and are just dead wood. But you have to loot the taxpayer. You've got to loot the taxpayer to compensate us for all this. So it was a massive fraud on a grand scale. And really the taxpayer, the white taxpayer, was being looted for the sole purpose of having their positions and jobs and so on replaced. Okay, now this came yet again. I mean, the amount of times I've come across this now, it's enough to drive, I think, any business owner or have a part ownership in a business, any business owner crazy. So we were approached by a quango. They wanted a certain amount of work done. We said, yes, we can do that. We were sort of talking generalities of price. Yep, they're happy with that. So we sort of ticked all the boxes. So then they wanted to have a meeting, the big meeting. And so we balk at that unless we know that it's moving forward, because these quangos or government departments or even the big multinationals, they're terrible time wasters. Because they've got so many people on staff that don't do anything now, that they want to, fill up their own fill up their own day with pointless and stupid meetings, which they invariably nearly all do. So we won't go to the meetings. I mean, within reason. We won't go to the meetings unless we know that things are moving forward. So they were, we asked, are you talking to anyone else? Is everything okay? Yep. So we agreed to the meeting. Now we were dealing with straight or not, I think he is, but straight white guy. He knew his stuff. He was the sort of the main interface here. So we assumed he would be the one, but when we turned up, they announced that really it was the department and the section that needed this work done. They would now be taking over. So the straight white guy who knew his stuff had brought it this far. So they were now handing it over. Now the woman who was in charge, who again is straight, we walked straight into an affirmative action hire. She's a white lady, but a radical activist lesbian, and they've put her in charge there. Although she's been working in public servicey type Quango areas for quite a while, so she at least had a understanding, not a deep understanding, but enough of an understanding of the process. She also spoke English. She's a local lady, and so she then says no, that she's not going to personally, she's going to delegate this to the committee, and that it is the recommendations of the committee that will determine whether or not we go ahead. Now, this wasn't something that they told us on the phone or in email correspondence or texts or anything like that. So we were rather annoyed by that, because that was changing the ground rules, but only after we'd got there. They could have said this at any time, and if they had, we wouldn't have turned up, by the way. So anyway, the committee. Now, the committee is four ladies. None of whom, all of whom are an affirmative action diversity hire. None of them speak English, or no, not as a first language. One of them, kind of, if you listened carefully enough and patiently enough, did a bit of lip reading, you could kind of work it out. But some of them, their English was so bad that you couldn't understand a word they were saying. None of them had any expertise in the area, and none of them had any expertise in the administrative procedures that were necessary for this sort of work to be done. So they came in. I mean, if you'd gone out to pick, let's pick people who know nothing, and can't speak English. Okay, well then we'll pick them. They were the people on the committee. And we thought, well, why would anybody do that? Are you trying to embarrass us? Because we're all straight white boys. You're trying to sort of rub our noses in some sort of ideological diversity or something. I mean, what are you doing here? These are the people least likely to achieve any success or to bring it to a successful conclusion. The least likely. They haven't got a fucking clue, and they don't speak English. So anyway, we were there, and we would already. I was annoyed because three of us had turned up. And so these, again, there's an East European lady who had that very paranoid, suspicious sort of Slavic thing of, you have to prove it to me, and you have to, you wanted it, you want it, so you better, and that I mean, it's classic Slavic way of business discussion. They see it as a power struggle. It's nothing to do with business or commerce or doing a job or achieving an outcome. It's a power struggle, and that's it. And then there's the I don't know, she's Pakistani or Indian or something from some sort of rural hinterland somewhere, and the list goes on. Only one person spoke English well enough that we could kind of understand it. So, and they were falling over themselves to invent, hurdles and hoops that we had to jump through. That again, none of this had been mentioned earlier. They sort of treated this as they were being tough and rigorous, and they were showing that they were, tough negotiators, and again, but they're just demonstrating their absolute third world peasant amateurism, and I mean, what a waste of time. So we tolerated this for half an hour or so, and we thought, no, this is an absolute utter joke. But it goes to illustrate now, all those people sitting there, those women sitting there, none of them had an actual job that we could work out. So jobs are being created in Quangos and public service and bigger organisations. Jobs are just being created and given to these people. And the Pakistani lady, she said she effectively got the job as soon as she walked off the plane. And she's still sort of starry-eyed of, here's someone who's never worked in her life and comes from some third world basket case shithole, and she's dazzled that she walks off the plane in a first world country and gets gifted. I mean, she doesn't understand diversity and affirmative action. She's got no concept of it, because it's something that would never happen in her country or where she comes from. So it's outside of her range of cognizance. As far as she's concerned, she got the job because she's fucking brilliant. That's how she got it. And because Australians are so useless, and that's her cognition of things. So these jobs are being created. Money is stolen from the taxpayer because the taxpayer is effectively funding this quango. And so these jobs are created for people that are not needed, jobs that are not needed, functions that are not needed. And again, the taxpayer being looted to pay for that. Or these jobs are needed, but they're white people are being refused jobs simply so they can slot in these brown lesbians from wherever. So either way, we're paying for it. But there's a third level of payment or cost. That is the level of incompetence and ineptitude. These people haven't got a fucking clue, and they can barely speak English. And so that means our job is so much harder. It takes so much longer. From their perspective, as in that quango, they're taking 10 times as long to get things done because they're putting people who don't know what they're doing into these sort of positions and circumstances. So we're all having to pay the price for this. We now, the initial price that we discussed with them, there's no way we could possibly do it for that price, not given the hurdles we have to jump through, the hoops we have to jump through, assuming we decide to go ahead with it, which we may not. I'm doubtful. A couple of my colleagues think we should persevere a bit longer, but I think it's going to be a waste of time. But assuming that it goes ahead, then we're going to have to look at something substantially higher price-wise when we're looking at, because everybody we're dealing with and we'll have to deal with is a low IQ third world peasant moron that doesn't speak English and has got that cunning sort of deviousness that these sort of people have. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.